Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Henry Schein Dental Academy webinar series. My name is Corinne, and I will be your moderator. We are excited to welcome Phylip Curtis, Director of Sales and Marketing at Unitas Dental, as our speaker tonight. Before we get started, we do have a few reminders for you. At any point during the webinar, if you have questions, please type them into the Q&A section of your control panel, and we will answer them live at the end. Henry Schein is not offering CE credit for viewing or attending this presentation live or on demand, and this webinar is sponsored by Unitas Dental. Phylip, welcome, and thank you for being with us tonight.
Thanks, Corinne. I'm excited to get started. All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us today. I know that for some of you, it may be later in your day. For some of you, it may be only 3 o'clock and your day isn't over yet. So I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules to learn some more about PPO negotiations and optimization today. So what we're going to go over today is pretty similar to some presentations we've given in the past. I know some of you, this may be the first time that you're watching this presentation. I know that there's some of you that may have watched this a couple of times, and it's been helpful for you to just kind of revisit the information. But let me give you kind of a quick introduction to myself and to Unitas. So like Corinne said, my name is Phylip Curtis. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing here at Unitas Dental. I've been here for over 8 years. We at Unitas, we've been in the business for over 10 years, actually close to 11 or maybe even 12, helping practices across the country with PPO negotiations, optimization, and even PPO credentialing. So not only have we done that, but we've worked with thousands of practices. We've been in all 50 states. We represent over 1,200 dental practices nationwide. We're located in sunny Mesa, Arizona. It's super hot outside today. It's like 85, which feels really hot right now in comparison to what we were experiencing. But we're all located in Mesa, Arizona. We have staff lot in Arizona, Utah, Idaho, and California. But we have over 65 insurance experts on staff, and all we are here to do is to help your dental practices increase your reimbursements through negotiation optimization. Now, that's why we're here today talking about this, because there's thousands and thousands of practices that need help with this, and many of which want to be able to do it on their own. So kind of the goal of the presentation today is for me to be able to share basically what is the framework that we use for our clients when helping negotiate and optimize, and how you can implement it on your own in your own practice. So you don't even necessarily need to work with somebody like Unitas. If you wanted to see what the full process is, this is really the full playbook, the whole recipe, I guess you could say, of being able to negotiate and optimize. Now, what we're going to cover are 3 main core concepts. It's a lot of quick and tactical material. And so I know it may be a ton of information, so I'll go through it quickly. But I want you to remember that there is an opportunity for you to get a worksheet more or less about what we're talking about today. But what we're going to cover, and I'll talk about that worksheet here in a second, what we're going to mainly cover today are, number one, how you can understand what your PPO participation actually is for your practice and what your reimbursement rates are now, and then what the top PPO negotiation tactics can be for your practice, and then also how to maximize your negotiation opportunities. If you want to download the step-by-step framework of what we're going to go over today and be able to actually implement it in your practice, it's a lot better than taking a bunch of notes. The PPO guide is a free resource that we've created that has basically everything I'm going over today in a format where you can kind of study along, make notes, and actually make sure that you're following all the steps. So as you're going through this today, if you ask yourself, man, I really wish I could just get a screenshot of all of Phil's slides, that's basically what this is in a workbook format. All you have to do is go to www.ppoguide.com, put in your name and your email, and it will automatically send you an email with a PDF version of this. So if you want to do that right now, you can print it out and follow along, or at least you can just kind of keep it up on your computer screen and make sure that you're paying attention to each of the different steps. Either way, whenever you download it, it's always going to be free, and it's always going to be at that web address. So I definitely recommend downloading that sometime today before you forget. But let's dive into the key understanding of what PPO participation is actually supposed to be, really how it actually works, and what your current reimbursements are. First, we're going to talk about how to discover and map out what your current participation is, whether you're a single location or if you got 40 locations. The process is still the same. We're going to talk about how to receive and document your actual fee schedule reimbursements. And then we'll talk about how to compare and repair any type of UCR or reimbursement discrepancies. Okay. Now, I apologize. I've been sick for almost 8 weeks now. So I've kind of lost my voice, and I am a little still kind of coughy. So hopefully everybody can hear me okay. If you can't hear me, let me know. I'll try to pull my microphone closer, but hopefully everybody can hear me okay. I'm trying to not talk super loud. so I don't hack up a lung while I'm on the webinar. So hopefully everybody can hear me okay. If somebody wants to send in a chat through the chat window, let me know that I'm coming through loud and clear. That would be super helpful. But let's jump into discovering and mapping the PPO participation. First and foremost, we have to understand that there's 3 different ways you can participate with an insurance company. It's not just a matter of I'm in network with it in insurance or I'm out of network with an insurance. That's the highest level of really how this works. But if you go down a layer more deeply, you're going to understand that being in network and out of network, if you look at in network under kind of a magnifying glass, there's 3 ways you can be in network with insurance. We'll talk about the differences, why they matter. And it's not just because I want to tell you why I think it's cool. It's because it's super important. It's a pretty important detail if you're going to actually negotiate. Just like I think the best comparison is it would be pretty impossible for you to be able to accurately render treatment to a patient without an x-ray. If just because a patient says a specific tooth is hurting doesn't mean you're going to know exactly what they need, whether that's an extraction or a root canal, right? Or if they've cracked their tooth, you're still going to need to do an evaluation and an x-ray to really understand what the whole picture is. That's the same thing with PPO participation. Knowing the difference down to the PPO is crucial if you ever are going to try to attempt to negotiate or optimize, because it's really the equivalent of seeing an x-ray on a patient, okay? That's number 1. And then we'll talk about calling provider relations. But let's jump into those participation types first and kind of delineate the difference between the 3 of them. For some of you, this may be new information. For some of you, this may be repetitive, but I think it's probably the most important part of the whole presentation today. Like I said, this presentation is meant to be educational. There's way more practices in the country that want help with this than we can even handle. That's part of the kind of philosophy behind why we want to educate practices, is because my goal today is for you to understand that this isn't like a pie in the sky dream. This is a reality. You can negotiate and optimize for your practice. We've been doing it every day for over 10 years. But again, if you want to be able to implement this on your own in your practice, there's steps that you can follow. Obviously, we'd love it if you worked with us. We think that we have some advantages that I'll talk about at the end. But at the end of the day, I want you to kind of look at this like it's really is a course. Obviously, we're not offering CE credit, but I want to be able to have you listen and write the notes as if this is something that you're being instructed on how to do it. So what is a direct contract? A direct contract is the simplest form of a relationship with an insurance company. This is what most practices think they have with every PPO. So if you're directly contracted, that means typically that you filled out a credentialing application with that specific insurance company. Let's say it's Guardian. You filled out Guardian's application. You agreed to Guardian's fee schedule. And so when you treat those patients and you send a claim into Guardian, Guardian returns that claim in network, paid according to the fees that they agreed upon with you on their fee schedule. That's a direct contract, right? A lot of you are probably saying, okay, isn't that just how insurance works in general? And the answer is yes, a lot of the times, but it gets more complicated when you add in this relationship, which is PPO to PPO leasing. So this dichotomy of 2 PPOs playing together and kind of working together through a leasing arrangement is relatively new. It's little bit newer than just dental insurance in general, but it's becoming increasingly more common with multiple insurance companies. This is typically an arrangement that happens to you. It's not usually something that you choose to participate in directly or intentionally, I guess is the right way to say it. So here's a good example of a PPO to PPO leasing arrangement. Guardian and Aetna, both of which lease from each other. So let's say 5 years ago, you decided to credential with Guardian, right? Because you like those patients, you like their payment, you like their fee schedule, you're happy with Guardian. But let's say you intentionally didn't credential with Aetna, right? So you never filled out a credentialing application. Well, Guardian, along with almost every carrier in the country, has the power to lease you out to basically any other insurance company without necessarily asking for your permission. And the reason why is because when you did sign the credentialing contract, you did give them the permission to do that. So you basically have already given them the permission to lease you out to somebody else. And the reason why is because under their understanding, you've said, I'm going to agree to these reimbursement rates. And so what's precluding them from letting other PPOs borrow that relationship that you've created? So what does that mean? Well, they may go partner with Aetna, create a little partnership together, and maybe they'll send you a letter in the mail, or maybe it will go in the trash can. But otherwise, they may send you a letter in the mail that says, congratulations, you're now in network with Aetna through your relationship with us, Guardian. So what does that mean? Aetna patients may now show up your practice. And when you send a claim into Aetna, expecting it to be out of network. It's now magically paid in network. And why? Because they've created this partnership together. And so once they've done that, the claim will get paid in network according to what fee schedule? Guardian's fee schedule, right? Because they're borrowing Guardian's reimbursement. They're borrowing that relationship that you created with Guardian already. So that's how PPO to PPO leasing works together. Now, when I describe it like that, a lot of practices worry or they get frustrated and they say, well, how are they able to do that? Well, the short answer is they're legally able to because you signed a contract. The better answer is it's not always a bad thing. A lot of times this brings you more patients through a fee schedule you're already taking. And if that fee schedule is decent, all it's doing is providing more patients to you. However, if you were intentionally out of network with a PPO that you wanted to be out of network with, and now this puts you in network, then maybe that's not a great scenario. Or maybe the reverse. What if you were in network with this PPO through a different leasing arrangement, and then this PPO decided to go borrow you from a different one, so they switched fee schedules? Does that make sense? So what if Aetna went from Aetna through Sun Life, and then they decided to pick you up Aetna through Guardian? So they themselves switched contracts. That might be a downside. If the fee schedule is different and worse between two of those options, then that's how a lot of times you'll see a claim all of a sudden start getting paid on a reimbursement rate that's like nowhere close to what you were used to. It could be above or it could be below. It's entirely just a different reimbursement. That stuff happens all the time, especially with all these leasing arrangements. So it's not a matter of saying leasing is bad. It's a matter of just saying it's important that we know that it happens and that if you want to, you can actually use it to your advantage, as opposed to just kind of throwing your hands up and saying, this is annoying, I don't want to have to deal with it. Because in reality, there's probably more pros to it than there are cons. You just have to be strategic about how do you take advantage of the fact that it exists in the marketplace. And we'll talk about that here later on. But that's why I think it's important that everybody knows that it happens, so that way we can know how to use it to our advantage. Okay. Now, the third type of participation is umbrella networking. This is increasingly becoming more common. Some practices know how it works, some practices don't. It's kind of like the last example with PPO to PPO leasing, but why it's a little bit different is because the main carrier here, like you can tell, I've made the graphic look a little bit different because they are a little bit different. An umbrella network company, the real official term for them is a third-party administrator or a network company. Those companies typically aren't really considered your average insurance company. They probably don't even sell insurance plans to patients. Many of them are simply just an intermediary or a repricer between insurance and dentist. And the reason why they operate like that is because they go out and they create multiple relationships with insurance companies. So examples of these are like Dentamax or Carrington or Connection Dental. A lot of practices know that Connection as GEHA or GEHA or GEHA. There's like 1,000 ways you can refer to them, or a company like Mavrist or Zealous. Most of these companies, like I said, they don't have card-carrying patients, so you never necessarily see a claim from them. But the way that they work is they go out and they create partnerships or network lists with multiple insurance companies. And then they do a good job at creating typically competitive fee schedules. And then if a dentist finds out about the network, they'll try and go recruit your practice and have you credential through them. So if you went and credentialed through Dentamax, for example, according to Dentamax's fee schedule, now what Dentamax can do is turn around and take your information as a dentist and blast it out to their network and start to pick you up and network through them, if that makes any sense. Now, how that works with the claim is Dentamax is never really involved. You're not sending a claim to Dentamax. You're still going to send a claim to one of these insurance companies because these are the patients you're treating. So just like how the graphic shows here, Guardian patient might show up, a MetLife patient might show up, a Principal patient might show up, and you're still sending a claim to those associated PPOs. But when it comes back and it's paid, what rate are they paying you on? They're paying you on Dentamax's fee schedule, the fee schedule you agreed to. Again, I hope I haven't beat a dead horse, but that's how an umbrella network works. Again, they're not necessarily a bad thing. They're just a way to participate with insurance. So it's important that we know that there's options, because when there's options, usually there's better options and there's worse options. But what I'm trying to emphasize is umbrella networks aren't better or worse than a direct contract, and vice versa. And leasing isn't better or worse than a direct contract. It always comes down to a couple of variables, one of which is the reimbursement rate. The reimbursement rate may be higher if you participate with this PPO through Connection, or it may be higher if you participate with this PPO directly. Just depends on your scenario. That's what I'm going to walk you guys through today, is to be able to evaluate the difference, to know that there may be better options for you to participate. And that's going to come down to, when we talk about the word optimization, it's about saying, hey, there may be 5 options for me to participate with this one insurance. Of those 5, I'm on 1. What do the other 4 look like? Are any of them better? What are the pros and the cons of switching? And can I actually make that switch happen? That's what I mean when I talk about optimization. Okay. I hope that's been helpful information. So I'm kind of trying to lay the groundwork of A, we need to understand that there's differences in participation. And then B, we need to know how to find out what that is when we have our practice. But the basic point of bringing home is if you understand how you participate as a dentist, that will tell you what needs to be done in order to negotiate and optimize. No different than if you have an x-ray in front of you and you've done an evaluation, you typically will be able to know what type of treatment to prescribe based on those 2 pieces of information. That's the same thing here with insurance. It's really hard to know who should I negotiate with, who can I negotiate with, what can I optimize if I don't know the answers to how do I actually participate with this doctor. And the reason why I'm kind of beating the dead horse here is because we talk to thousands of practices every year, and a lot of them want to do this on their own or they've tried. And the minute they find out it's possible, they pick up the phone and they call Guardian and they try to negotiate right now. And that's the wrong step. That's why I'm trying to educate everybody is you need to understand, how do I participate with Guardian before I attempt to negotiate with Guardian? Because depending on how I participate, that's going to control who I talk to first and what my options are. And that's what I'm going to go through here in the next couple of steps. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody. Now that we understand that, we want to find out, how does each dentist at your practice participate with insurance? And the best way to find that out is to ask the insurance company. And so when you're asking for that, you can ask for 2 pieces of information. How do I participate with you, right? And what is my fee schedule? And the way that you get that is the fastest way that you get that is calling provider relations. So you can call provider relations, or if they have a portal, you can check your portal, or you can email them. Whatever's going to be the fastest method for you. You're going to ask, how does this doctor participate? What is the fee schedule associated to that participation? And the reason why this is important is it's per doctor, per location. So for some of you may be multi-location, some of you may be single location. Some of you may have a ton of providers or 1 provider. But here's the important principle is participation follows the doctor, doesn't necessarily follow the tax ID number. For example, I have a brother-in-law that has a practice in Santan Valley, Arizona. He and his co-owner both are operating an in-network with an insurance company under the same tax ID, as they should be. However, when they started, they were not participating the same. One of them was direct with Aetna. The other one was in-network with Aetna through a different contract. Just because they worked at the same location, were credentialed on their same tax ID number, didn't guarantee that they ended up in Aetna system the same. And so if we would have operated under the assumption that they were participating identically and started to try to improve things, it would have been just as dangerous as if we had 2 patients come in and they're twin boys, and I did an x-ray on one of them and said, oh, you've got a cavity on this tooth? Okay, I guess you both do. And so I'm going to drill on both. That'd be dumb, right? You would never do that as a dentist. But that's the same thing with insurance. Just because you both work at the same location, even if you bill under that same doctor, I'm telling you, it's going to follow the doctor. It's going to follow the doctor's NPI number, tax ID, and location. So when you're calling provider relations or emailing, you want to confirm the participation per doctor. A lot of times they will give you back a single piece of information, and you may be specific and say, hey, I need the participation for Dr. Scott and for Dr. Whiting. And they'll give you back, yeah, they're in network through a direct contract. And a lot of times you want to be a little bit OCD about it and say, can you confirm, is Dr. Scott direct contracted and Dr. Whiting is direct contracted, or are they different? So that's where it's really important that you're making the delineation, because if they are different, we definitely want to know that. Okay. At the same time, you can ask for the fee schedule. You're going to want to know what is the fee schedule that's associated to this participation, because that's what we're negotiating, right? And that's what we're trying to improve. That's the baseline of where we're at. A really dangerous assumption to make is to say, I'm pretty sure I already have that fee schedule in my Dentrix, right? I'll just go look at whatever's in Dentrix. Now, I wish that was the case, that those were accurate, but I'm telling you, after doing this for 10 years, if I was a betting man, I'd say probably as close to 80% of practices have out-of-date fee schedules in their Dentrix or in their practice management software. It's not because you're lazy. It's not because you're trying not to. It's because fee schedules can change so frequently, right? They can change annually, or they can switch participations, that it's never a good idea to just assume that you have the most accurate thing, right? Again, I always go back to the x-ray example. Assuming that your Dentrix is up to date, with fee schedules is like assuming that an x-ray from 8 years ago is accurate in terms of what the patient needs. That's how different and how much these can fluctuate. So whenever you're trying to improve a fee schedule reimbursement, we are firm believers that you want to work off of the most accurate information. So you want to get participation, fee schedule by doctor, by location, by insurance company as soon as possible, right? So you want the information up to date. You want it from right now, okay? So if you're going to do this on your own, you need to ask again, I guess is what I'm getting at, okay? Moving on to the next step. Pause. Marie just asked, will this recording be shared with us later? Absolutely, we are recording this. I believe that they'll send it out to you probably within the week. For those of you that are attending, you'll get a recording. But also, just a reminder, Marie, and for everybody else, the tactical worksheet here of what we're going through is available to you for free. You guys go to www.ppo.guide and you can go download it. It has all the same information in a worksheet format you can print out. So if you're interested in saying, I want to actually do this, no, there's no better way than having a guide to tell you what to do and remind you so you can make sure that you've done it. And so that's why we've got that guide for it. Because my biggest pet peeve is giving webinars with tons of helpful information and then expecting you to remember it all or to go back and watch a replay. I really want you to be able to implement it. So that's why we've created that guide for you. So hopefully that's helpful. All right. Comparing and repairing UCR and reimbursement discrepancies is probably one of the most overlooked problems in a practice, I'd say, which is why we talk about it all the time. There's a lot of practices out there that try to keep their UCRs pretty low so they can stay competitive. And when I say UCR, that's a pretty common term, right? But other practices just refer that to their own office fee schedule or their office fees, whatever you want to refer to them as. Basically, what I'm saying is, what are your prices? What are your sticker prices for your procedures that you would bill to a cash paying patient, that you would put on a claim that says, here's my usual and customary, what are those rates? And the reason why those matter in terms of negotiation and optimization is because they correlate to your reimbursements on an individual level and geographically, and they're pretty important. And there's no better way to shoot yourself in the foot when you're negotiating than to come to the table to try to negotiate and you have super low UCRs. And I'll tell you why. One of the things that BPOs look at when they're negotiating and when they're looking at fee schedules geographically is, what have the practices been submitting to us on their claims in terms of what their UCRs are? That's the data point that they use when they're setting fee schedules. And why they do that is because the nature of what an insurance is supposed to be is a discount off of what the sticker price is. So if all these doctors are telling me my sticker price is X, I, as a PPO, I'm going to set my reimbursements here because I want to see a substantial discount, but I also need to show that discount to the patient. That's my value proposition as an insurance company, is that I'm getting them a discount where I'm going to cover a percentage of the reimbursement, however they look at it, okay? So if in a geographic area, or even just for yourself, if your UCR for a specific procedure is super low, what do you think is going to happen to your reimbursement? It's also going to be super low, right? And the reason why is no PPO would ever be caught dead reimbursing you above what your UCR is, right? That wouldn't make any sense. They would never do that. So if you're charging $80 for procedure, what's your reimbursement going to be? Probably 60, 50, 40, 70, right? It just depends on wherever you're at, right? But what if your peers in your area are getting reimbursed $95? Do you ever have a chance to get 95 if you've said your sticker price is 80? No, right? So one of the first things you can do is make sure that your UCRs are competitive for your area to ensure that you have room to grow when you're negotiating, okay? So how do you find that out? The easiest way to do it is to take all those fee schedules you've just gathered from the insurance companies and just plop them into a spreadsheet. A lot of those fee schedules, though, they're like 20 pages long. They've got 900 procedures on them. But in a couple of steps, I'm going to show you how to focus in on which 20 to 35 specific procedures matter the most to you. So that way, when you create the reports I'm going to show you today, you can really only focus on the procedures that actually matter, and you're not having to do a bunch of data entry for 900 procedure codes that you never do, right? That would be a huge waste of time. And I'll show you in a couple of slides how to do that. But you're going to start by entering into a spreadsheet, and you're going to compare your top 20 to 30 procedures and all of your reimbursements, and you're going to plug in your UCRs as well. And then what you want to do is look horizontally and say, okay, for my pro fee, what am I charging? Is it $60? All right, what are all of my reimbursements? Do I have any reimbursements on here that are above my UCR or really close? If that's the case, that's an indication that I need to bump my UCR up for my area, okay? If you have any situation where reimbursement is above your UCR, you absolutely need to raise it, okay? Because you're shooting yourself in the foot and you're probably never getting that reimbursement because you're saying this is what it costs and they're going to pay you a discount off of that, okay? Once you've done that simple analysis, the next thing you should do to just also kind of gauge to make sure that you're competitive for your area in general is you should utilize any available percentile-based analysis tool that's going to tell you how do your UCRs compare to peers in your area. So there's a couple tools out there. We do this for our clients. Henry Schein has a fee analysis tool. That's the same one that we use. Really what it does is it takes national fee data and claims data across the country to see what are the average UCRs being used, what are the ones being submitted in a percentile basis for this zip code, and then it puts it into percentiles. It plugs in your UCR and shows you where you fall. If you're on the lower end of percentiles, like anywhere beneath like the 50th and 60th percentile, that means you're below average. And so you probably want to consider raising. So when we do this for clients, this is one of the first things we do. We look at your UCRs to make sure they're competitive. If they're low, we'll suggest maybe bumping them up a couple percentiles to increase the likelihood of success with negotiations and optimization. It's not a deal breaker. It doesn't have to happen in order to negotiate, but it definitely contributes to having more likelihood of having higher reimbursements. So the long and the short of it is high UCRs correlate to high reimbursements. That's the one thing to remember. Low UCRs typically correlate to low reimbursements. And a lot of practices worry about pricing themselves out of the market. They don't want to be so high and nobody comes to them. That's why you want to look at those two variables. How do I compare against my fee schedules? So I'm not shooting myself in the foot, but then also how do I compare to practices in my area? Well, how you find that out is by using percentile tools, okay? All right, moving on. Final plug, go download the guide. If any of this has been helpful to you, I'm assuming it is because you're still listening to the webinar. If you're furiously taking notes, save yourself the hand cramps and go download the guide. It's free. You just put in your name and your email and it will shoot you this PDF immediately. You could download it and print it while we're on the call today and follow along. So all you got to do is go to ppoguide.com. All right, let's jump into the next step, step number 2, which is the PPO negotiation tactics to use if you're going to actually attempt to negotiate. There's some pretty important ones. 3, kind of the rule of 3 is what I try to follow to make it not super complicated. First one is ensuring that you don't waste time on the wrong procedures. The second one is how to approach the actual process. In other words, who do you talk to? What do you say? What's the right thing to say? How do you ask appropriately? And the third one is how to compare offers when they actually come back from the insurance company to how do you actually evaluate them? How do you know if it's good? How do you know if you're looking at the right things? How do you know you're not signing up for something that's going to lock you into a bad rate for a long time? We'll talk about all 3 of those things right now, okay? All right, first and foremost, so how do you ensure you're not wasting time negotiating and comparing and analyzing the wrong procedures? Well, the basic principle to understand is that while there may be 983 CDT codes, most practices only do about like 35 of those 900. Like you already know, right? Everybody knows that. But the question is, which ones are they? And the best way to get real objective empirical data on that is to go through your practice management software. So it starts by getting what's called an annual production summary. Those can come out of almost every practice management software, whether it's Dentrix or EOSoft or anything. And in that scenario, you'll be able to export the production summary and it would list each procedure by code, how many times you performed that procedure in terms of like quantity, and how much production was generated. And what you want to look at is at least a 12-month period because that gives you enough data, okay? Once you get that report, if it comes out in a CSV file, awesome. If it comes out in PDF, you're gonna have to do some data entry. But where you want it to end up is in a spreadsheet with all 3 of those columns: procedures, quantity, production, and then you want to sort by production. Because what you want to know, first and foremost, what are my top grossing, top money-making procedures? And start to boil that down to about 20 to 35 of those procedures. What we found is that 35 is kind of that sweet spot number that usually makes up almost 95% of all of your revenue, boils down to 35 specific procedure codes. Once you know what those are, you're going to save that data set and probably just use that same spreadsheet for all the rest of the reports we're making today. And you're going to use that as kind of your core table because that's what you're going to look at when you're evaluating offers. That's what you're going to be looking at in the previous step, when you're looking at how do my reimbursements compare to my UCRs. It's best to just start with those 35 procedures that matter the most to you, okay? Let's see, and what's the next step? All right, next step is approaching the PPO negotiation process. So it's important to know that a couple of things about how it works with insurance companies. Most PPOs will consider negotiating every 2 to 3 years. If you've gotten an increase from them in less than 2 to 3 years, the likelihood of them being willing to even have a conversation is pretty slim to none, right? They try to set those out every 2 years, right? So just know that that's a typical case. Also, you need to know that there's some insurance companies that have likelihood of negotiating, some that have medium to less likelihood of negotiating, some that have almost no likelihood of negotiating. One of the main insurance companies that historically really has never negotiated, in our experience, has been Delta Dental. It's not to say Delta hasn't increased their fees before, because they do that. They'll still increase their fee schedules annually, and sometimes maybe not annually, but here and there. But the majority of the time with Delta, they've been pretty unwilling to attempt to negotiate with fee schedules. So they're pretty much stuck in stone. I don't see them changing anytime soon. However, most every other carrier has either had a history of negotiating or actually negotiates actively, or they at least have opportunity to be optimized. So I guess what I'm saying is it makes sense to ask every insurance company. And a lot of times you may still get a no, but it's better to ask. And the way that you ask and who you approach, that's going to contribute to your success even more. So let's talk about that. Step 2 and 3 here is really about who to talk to and what to say. So the best place to start, again, is always going to be provider relations. If you don't have a specific representative that you've worked with before or that you know, then just start with the general provider relations line or email. And what you're going to do is you're going to request what's called a fee schedule increase. Don't necessarily need to use the words in negotiation. You can just say, I'd like to request a fee schedule increase, or unhappy with their fees, right? So that sentence or that phrasing is probably the most effective, which is, I'd like to request a fee schedule increase, we're unhappy with their fees. It's probably going to get you to the right person the quickest, right? Now, assuming that you get to somebody in provider relations that's willing to negotiate with you, they'll respond with their answer. If they respond with an offer, that's fantastic. However, you want to make sure that you're approaching the right person to begin with, because there's nothing worse than wasting your time. Now, this is part of the reason why we gathered participation at the beginning and why we care about knowing the difference is if your participation is not technically self-explanatory or necessarily through a direct contract, then it's going to matter. So for example, if you're in network with Guardian under Aetna, right, and you want to negotiate with Guardian, then who do you need to negotiate with? In that scenario, it's Aetna. So if your Guardian patients are being paid through Aetna's fee schedule, which fee schedule needs to be negotiated? Aetna. So who should you be talking to first? Aetna, right? Does that make sense? That's why knowing the participation, and if anybody falls under somebody else, you need to be talking to whatever fee schedule and whatever company published the fee schedule that's being paid on, that's the company you need to talk to first, because that's what's currently in place, right? If you can get that to increase, you increase whatever's happening now. The next step is going to be to ask, can I beat what I'm on now? And that's optimization. But you first want to try to improve what's currently in place and then ask yourself, can I beat it? Okay. That's important to make sure you're approaching the right person. All right. Now, if a PPO actually responds back with an offer to you, it can get pretty exciting, especially if it's never happened before. But the worst thing you can do is just get excited at the fact that they said that there's an increase and just sign it immediately. Because a lot of practices will be like, man, we'll take anything. So if you'll give it to us, fantastic. That's awesome. Oh, my crown went up by 50 bucks. Awesome. I'll take it. And I sign it. Now, the worst thing you can do is to do that without doing some simple math, because a lot of practices don't realize when an insurance company comes back with an offer, part of their negotiation process can be, okay, we'll give you some on these codes, but we're going to take some away on these codes. So we may give you $50 here, but we're going to take $10 here, right? So if you're not paying attention to all of your procedures or the ones that at least matter to you, then it could be a net loss depending on how frequently you do the procedures, right? $100 procedure increase could get outweighed by just what looks like a $5 procedure decrease if you do this procedure 1,000 times and this one only 100 times, right? At the end of the day, it's going to come down to how do they balance each other out. That's why knowing how frequently you do these procedures is going to be pretty important when you're evaluating these offers, because you have to pay attention to frequency of each procedure at the same time. Okay. So, well, how do you do that? Right. That seems impossible. Not that crazy. You just have to have the right report. Okay. So when you're using the previous steps, you got to start with the 20 to 35 procedures that have the highest quantity and production revenue in a spreadsheet. You're going to plug those in and you're going to compare your current fee schedule. So what are they paying you today against what is the new offer on the table, right? Code for code across your top 20 to 35. Like I said, you need to pay attention to annual frequency on each procedure. So it might behoove you to also plop into that same fee schedule, or sorry, into that same report, how frequently, according to your production summary, do you do those procedure codes? Because again, if you do one more than the other, you need to do the math to say, if this one went down, how much is that going to lose me versus how much this one is going to gain me? Okay. And will it be a net gain or will it be a net loss? And again, your production summary is showing you all of your patients. So unless your software can break down production by PPO, then you're going to have to just take it your best guess. But if the law of probability is correct, which it typically is in ratios, generally the ratios carry over. So even if this one outweighs this one, it generally will outweigh it across all PPOs anyway. So you'll probably be okay. But again, it's important to make the delineation to understand if $100 goes up here and this one goes down by 5, is it going to make me more or less money? Okay. Once you've done that math, then you have the decision of whether or not you're going to accept the fee schedule. If it looks like it's an all-around gain for you, that's great. What I typically recommend doing is kind of 2 rules. Number 1, if it's anywhere above a 3 or 5% increase, that's probably a pretty good offer, because that's pacing with regular inflation. I know we won't talk about inflation now, but it's pacing with regular inflation. So that's probably pretty good. It's above that. Also, you want to compare, how does this offer compare to the PPOs I'm taking right now, right? So how does this new offer compare and rank against all the other insurance companies? If this is at or above the average fee schedule you're accepting, then again, that's probably a pretty good offer, all right? Most fee schedule increases, though, if you do accept them, will take time to go into place. So if you look at a fee schedule, you feel comfortable with it and you sign off on it and send it back to the insurance company, it's not going to go into place immediately. Typically will take them 30 to 90 days to put that into their system. And then they should provide you with an effective date saying, all right, as of June 1st, this is your new fee schedule. So if you know what that date is, then you better audit your EOBs after June 1st to make sure that you're getting paid on the new fee schedule. I can't tell you how many practices I've talked to have done this on their own, have negotiated, were told they got an increase, and then 6 months or a year later, they check an EOB and it's nowhere close to what the fee schedule is supposed to be, right? So you want to audit your EOBs to make sure that you're getting paid according to what you agreed to, okay? It's probably the most helpful tip I can give you today. All right, I see a couple of questions coming through the chat window, so that's a good reminder that if you have questions as we go through this, feel free to put them into the chat window so that way we can address them. We'll have a Q&A session at the end. All right, let's go over how to maximize your negotiation opportunities. So there's really 3 kind of core principles with maximizing your opportunities. Number 1, how are you going to ensure, if you're going to negotiate, how do you ensure that the fees are competitive for your area? So how do you know that that's actually a good offer, right, in comparison to what may be on the table for others? Number 2, how do you minimize optimization risks and maximize those benefits? If you know that it's more profitable to potentially participate with Guardian through a different contract than what you're on now, how do you even access that? And how do you make sure that you access it without messing anything up, without dropping out of network? How do you make sure that you're minimizing those risks, right? Last one is, if you're going to take all the time and the effort to negotiate and to optimize, how can you even begin to calculate or project what your return on investment could be through these efforts, right? So those are kind of the next questions that most practices ask. Now that we've gone through kind of the how, it's more of a why and how can I protect myself and how do I make sure that this makes the most sense for me? So let's jump into the first principle, which is, how do you really ensure a PPO fee schedule is competitive for your area? Now, one of the most important principles to realize is that when you accept a new fee schedule from an insurance company, you will be locked into that fee schedule for a minimum of at least 2 years. When I say locked in, that doesn't mean that you can never terminate your plan with an insurance company. You are always at free will to terminate a plan with an insurance company, but it means that you likely won't be able to renegotiate it for at least 2 years. So you're stuck on those fees unless you do something drastically different. So if you get locked into a low fee schedule, then it's all the more reason to realize that the fee schedule offers that you're reviewing, if you're doing yourself, are pretty dang important. And if you're not totally sure if that's an actual competitive offer for your area, then you got to realize that there's other opportunities out there for you. That's where somebody like Unitas comes to the table. We not only, of course, created the plan here because we've been doing this for 10 years. So this recipe book, we've written it, right? This is the process that we've figured out. We've spent the decade figuring out what the right process is. Believe me, we've gone down multiple different paths to figure out what the best one is. We've made mistakes along the way, but we figured out what is the right course here. It's just like a recipe book. Like grandma's chili is the best because grandma's been figuring it out for 2 decades. It's the same thing here with Unitas. We figured out the recipe book. But what our biggest value proposition, I think, is we have the data to compare an offer to determine how competitive it is. So that's one of the leverage pieces we provide to a practice like yours. Whether you have 1 location or 40 locations, you only have access really to the fee schedules that you get paid on. When we've worked with thousands of practices over a decade. We data bank all that information. When we evaluate an offer that comes back from an insurance company, we can look at it in accordance with what's in our system to say, is this a comparable and fair offer for the area? Or should we continue to push back because we know that there's possibly more on the table, right? It's kind of like when you're selling your house now, the market's insane. Everybody knows they can get more for their house than they probably should. But if you went on to Zillow, you could look at what your neighbor sold their house for and say, that's probably what I should sell my house for. There's not a Zillow for dentistry. Well, that's what we provide. We're able to come in and say, what is the comparable offer? And then tell you whether or not we should continue to push back or whether or not we think that's a comparable offer for your area. One of the catches in dentistry is when you sign contracts with insurance companies, you agree to not share your fees. It's part of the reason why it's frustrating when you have low reimbursements is because you don't know what your other providers in your areas are being paid. One of the benefits of working with a third party like us is we kind of level that playing field by having the knowledge what other practices are being paid. Now, we take a pretty serious approach to not sharing fees. There's never going to be a situation where we would go through our files, grab a fee schedule and say, here's what Dr. Smith's getting paid. We just definitely negotiate, right? Why we wouldn't do that is number one, for you to do that, it's illegal according to your contract. And number two, there's no greater way for us to damage a relationship with an insurance company than sharing the fee schedules, right? That'd be silly for us to do that. However, because we have the information, we can know how far and how much longer to push because we're aware of what's happening in the area. Doesn't necessarily mean we're going to get the best offer, but we have the awareness of what's there. Okay, that's what we can provide. Also, we have high-level dedicated insurance contacts. So it's not a matter of just knowing what's on the table. It's a matter of knowing who to talk to. So a lot of times we have somebody that's different than just in provider relations. We have somebody that's a little bit higher up at the organization who may have more access to negotiate at a better level. That's one of our advantages too. We also have the time. So we negotiate on your behalf. We can coach you through it. We can do it for you. We have the ability to take most of this off your plate. We've been doing it for thousands of practices. You can outsource it to somebody like us to take it off your plate. We've got a highly trained team. We've got years of experience. We have a proven track record at doing it. That's one of the benefits along with that. Another reason why insurance companies are typically willing to negotiate or even talk to us to begin with, and even allow us to try to work with you to optimize or to negotiate, is because we're not a complete adversary to an insurance company. We understand that there has to be a dichotomy here between insurance and patient and dentist, but we also bring value to the table. We credential hundreds of providers with insurance every month. We are one of the largest credentialers in the country. We bring new dentists to insurance all the time. So there's a little plug right there. If you're adding a new associate or if you're starting a new practice, we have just as much business doing that, helping new practices start. And that to an insurance company is super valuable. We bring them new dentists, we bring them new blood. So instead of us just only ever having a one-way street conversation saying, we want more fees, we realize that we actually are bringing something to the table at the same time, which is why we're continuing to be able to have an amicable relationship and professional working relationship with insurance companies, because it's not one-sided. We're actually bringing value to the table. So that's one of the advantages we bring as well. So we bring them something of value, which is all these new doctors, okay? I'm seeing a ton of chats coming in, which is hopefully indicative that you guys have good questions or lots of questions, which I hope you do. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them into the chat window. So that's number one, right? Which is so the real conclusion here is how do you ensure your offers are competitive? You need to work with somebody that understands what's available to your area, which Unitas does, okay? As one of the largest negotiators in the country, we can help you understand that. How do you minimize optimization risk and maximize benefit? Well, the way that you minimize risks to optimization is doing it before and knowing what the risks are. I know that sounds kind of silly, but that's really the best way to describe it. It's kind of like saying, how do you minimize the risk of leading to an infection when doing a root canal? Well, you should probably have done root canals before, right? You should probably either be a specialist or you've been doing a lot of those in your practice. It's the same thing with optimization. Optimization, and that's probably a good analogy. Optimization is more like a root canal, right? And negotiation is more like an extraction. Should somebody pull their own tooth? Probably not. But my daughter, she's 5. She just lost her first tooth yesterday, or not yesterday, probably 2 or 3 days ago. She pulled it on herself, right? In that simple scenario, of course she could pull it out. It was her baby tooth. She had her mouth was clean. Everything was fine. I didn't need to take her to the dentist because it wasn't impacted. Everything was fine. A lot of negotiations are as simple as that, right? But the majority of negotiations and optimization are a lot more complicated. They require actual dentistry, like a root canal or an actual cavity or filling or an impacted tooth that's kind of pushing out a baby tooth. So again, that's kind of how optimization is too. There's risks involved to optimizing. And again, just to reiterate, when I say optimization, the kind of core concept I'm getting at is based on how you currently participate, we can identify other arrangements that may be more profitable than just negotiating. There's multiple paths to participating with an insurance company. And we've helped thousands of practices switch from one path to another intentionally to get a higher fee schedule. For example, like we were saying earlier, if you're in network with Guardian directly, Guardian also has partnerships with 4 or 5 or 6 other insurance companies like Aetna and Sun Life and Connection and Carrington and Zealous. All of those companies have their own set of fee schedules. So if there's 5 ways I can participate with Guardian, and I'm only under one of those 5, what's the likelihood that any one of these 4 has a fee schedule on the table that's better than what I'm currently on? The likelihood's pretty high just because it's probability. That's what I mean by optimization. Now, that's great to know that, but it's another thing to actually switch from a direct contract to being a network through Carrington or being a network with the connection to a direct contract. Going from A to B or from C to D, that requires specific tactics, specific paperwork. The timing has to be appropriate. You don't time it correctly and you don't pay attention to who you're sending the information to, you can drop out of network on accident for a long period of time. Some of these may require that you actually do go out of network. So you need to make sure you time it so that out of network window is very small. Some of these may, when you shift from A to B or from B to D, may include some patients and exclude some other patients. So it may include MetLife PDP, but not MetLife PDP plus patients. So those are the types of delineations I'm talking about. Is it's not just a matter of saying, I know that this exists and I want to go from A to D. You have to know what are the ramifications. Because really, in all honesty, when it comes to optimization, there's really rarely an optimization path that doesn't have some element of either risk or con to it. It's not all sunshine and roses. Usually there's some element of risk or an overall con, right? That you have to weigh when you're deciding whether or not to optimize. But that's one of the benefits of us doing it. It's not only have we done it before, so we know the risks, right? But we can communicate those to you and we can help you balance the decision to say, look, I know you're directly contracted with this carrier, but if you switch to this participation type, it's going to go up this percentage, which would increase your revenue by this much. Now, here are the risks. It may mean this, may mean this, may mean this. Let's weigh the pros and the cons. We still suggest you do it. We'll do it for you, but you get to make the final decision. And if you say yes, we'll carry out the work for you. Or maybe you'll say no, but at least now you know you have options. And maybe 4 months from now, you might change your mind and then we can do it for you. Does that make sense? So when it comes down to optimization, if you want to minimize the risk, maximize the benefits, it's a lot like specialized dentistry. You want to go to somebody who's been specializing it for a long time, and that's us. Okay. Now, here's a graphic, but I'm going to skip right over that because we already went over it with my fancy hand graphics here. So the last one is, how do you calculate the return on investment from PPO negotiations? Well, for us, when we project a return on investment for our clients or potential clients, we use some data that we have, and then we use data that you know. So for over 10 years, we've implemented this for thousands of practices. When we do it, we keep track of what we've done. We keep track of our historical results. So it allows us to kind of create an estimated average result for a practice. So that's kind of what I have right here. So when I work with a practice, or if I'm talking to a potential customer, we usually bring up a chart like this and say, all right, what has been our average increase? But that average increase is irrelevant. What's most relevant is how much production have you been doing, right? Because if you do $100,000 a year in production and I got an average 10% increase on only half of that, that's 100,000 at 50 grand, that's $5,000, right? If you do $1 million a year, that's $50,000, right? So it depends on how much production you do. And so in return to, is this worth working with Unitas on? It comes down to how much your production is, okay? So again, the basic simple math here is, what is your average annual production? Most practices do around $1 million if they're one location, open 5 days a week, and they're super busy. Of that $1 million in production, typically at least half of that comes from an insurance company or insurance companies that we're able to negotiate with. Now, not every insurance company is going to negotiate with us or with you. Not every insurance company is going to come back with something fantastic. And again, maybe you might not want to take up every optimization recommendation we make. So that's why we usually say at least 50% of your practice, typically we end up touching somehow through the efforts we make. So if that was 500,000, which is half of $1 million, if our average increase was 10%, which that's our average for a typical practice, that's $50,000. Above average is around 18%, below average is around 4%, right? So an average though is an average. Why we average it is because if we ended up improving 6 of your fee schedules, some of those could have gone up by 2%. Some of them could have gone up by 25%. When we take those together, it boils down to an average of 10. So this is a conservative estimate, but again, at its core, it's an estimate based off of what our historical data has been. And we run these projections based off of your main top procedure codes, which we feel is pretty conservative, but pretty accurate at the same time. So hopefully that answers your question in terms of if we were to work with somebody like Unitas and Unitas was able to do this for us, what would be kind of the projected return on investment? Here's kind of the answer for that. So adjust the math according to your production, right? Here's some case studies of practices we've worked with before. We worked with Dr. Morgan in North Carolina. We negotiated 5 of his PPO contracts. We optimized 2 PPO networks. That resulted in over $64,000 in additional revenue for his practice. He didn't have to change anything. He didn't necessarily have to treat more patients. He didn't have to hire 5 more people onto his staff. He was able to continue to get paid more for the work he was already doing, which is why everybody comes to this conclusion of I want to get better procedure reimbursements. It's because you obviously want to get paid more for the work that you're already doing, especially if you're super busy, right? Dr. Baker in Texas, 5 and 3 was $79,000. And then Dr. Young in Florida, 7 negotiated contracts, 4 networks. Of course, an awesome opportunity to get over $100,000 in additional revenue. Now, I wanted to kind of just reiterate what we went over today. The 3 key strategies to PPO negotiation is first, you have to understand your participation in your reimbursements. You have to discover and document that participation status with each company and collect your current fee schedules. Number 2, you got to tactfully approach PPO negotiations. Ensure that you don't waste time on the wrong procedures. Make sure you're talking to the right people and saying the right things. And lastly, you need to understand the validity of maximizing your opportunities and the value of working with somebody like us. And if you partner with PPO experts, we can help evaluate those additional opportunities and maximize any type of in-network participation that you have, okay? Now, I know it was a ton of information. It's 6:53 Eastern, 3:53 in Arizona. This has been a ton of information. This reminds me of my daughter. This reminds me more of me because I have a picture of when I was probably 2 years old doing the same thing, which is trying to drink out of a sprinkler. But if you feel like that was a ton of information, it's because it was. If you want to download the guide, just go to www.ppoguide.com. It's 100% free. It's the worksheet of what we just went over today. If while you were watching this, you thought to yourself, man, I really wish, Janet was on here or Dr. Smith or Dr. Bob to watch this. Number 1, we'll be sending out a replay, which is great. But number 2, this is the tactical guide to actually implementing this in your practice. So if you haven't yet, 100%, you definitely need to go download the guide. Now, what I want to pivot to at this point before we get into the Q&A, because we've got about 5 or 10 more minutes, is I want to make everybody who's been on the webinar a special offer for being here and how I think we can probably help bridge the gap with the information. What's going to happen after today's webinar, especially if it's 6:54, so it's almost 7 o'clock Eastern time, is you're probably not going to go back to treating patients. You're probably already at home. You're going to go eat dinner. Hopefully you'll do that. But if you're in the office and tomorrow you're going to come back, treat patients, schedule appointments, this is the last thing on your plate, right? And so you need higher reimbursements. I know that we can help you. So I'm going to make you guys an offer right now of if you're willing to talk with us and go through a specific consultation, I'll give you some free tools and guides to if you were to do it on your own or just to continue in your practice to make it worth spending the almost hour with me today to make your life a little bit easier. So number 1, if you go schedule a free PPO consultation with us, you'll get a couple of things. Number 1, a free 30-minute consultation with somebody like me or somebody on our team what we'll do is it's a consultation. It's not a sales pitch. It's us consulting what your options are. Number one, we're going to review your specific PPO insurances, what state you're in, if you've recently negotiated, and then we'll help calculate your potential return on investment if you were to work with us and identify which of our services you're best fit for. We work with lots of different kinds of practices. So we have different veins of service that funnel towards on what type of practice you are. Whether you opened yesterday, you're opening a new practice in 3 months, whether you've been open for 2, 5, 20 years, or whether you've been in the network for a long time, or maybe you barely take any insurances and you feel like you need to join PPOs really for the first time, or whatever you are across that whole gamut, we've got a service for you with a different price point and a different arrangement. So we'll identify what the best option is for you. If you schedule that call, all you have to do is go to ppoguide.com/go. So it's a similar link that we've been doing today, but you just add /go. We'll take you straight to a page that looks just like this. It's a little online scheduling tool. You can pick a date. There's slots this week. You pick a date and time. You can book it. It's free. It's 30 minutes. It's over the phone. If you're available for it, we'll do a screen share and walk you through what your options are. Okay. If you schedule that call and complete it with our team, I'll give you a couple of pretty valuable assets here. First thing I'm going to give you is our internal PPO provider relations master contact list. So what that is, like I said, we make hundreds, if not thousands of phone calls to insurance companies every month. So if you want our master contact list, which is the one that we use to make sure we're calling the right number, then I will give that to you. I have it ready. We'll give it to you. It's easily $199 value. You'll get it absolutely free. So if you want to save yourself hours of time sitting on a hold because you called the wrong number or you clicked the wrong extension, and if you're going to do this yourself and you want to collect your own participation faster, by all means, this is probably the key to doing that. You can print it out, keep it handy, and make anybody who works in the front office's life 100 times easier. Okay. If you schedule that call and give us the chance to walk through what your options are, guaranteed it'll be worth your time alone to do that, let alone to get one of these. Okay. Next thing is our e-guide. So after working for 10 years with thousands of practices, we get a million questions every day around all things insurance and even outside of insurance, right? Just because we work with a practice so intimately and we do so much with insurance, we get a ton of questions, a lot of which we either don't know how to answer, or if we do know how to answer, we still can't help you with it because it's not our specialty. And so what we've done is we've gone out and we've created resources for our team so that way they know where to point clients in that direction, whether that's questions about down coding or balance billing, or how do out-of-network benefits work with that carrier, or info changes. How do I update my tax CD number? How do I add an associate to my PPOs quickly? So if you want to save yourself hours of time with those 35 most common insurance-related questions, we've got this free e-guide. It has all of the resources in there with the most common questions and how to resolve them. That's also yours for free. The last one is probably my favorite. It's the fee schedule analysis tool. So if you want to be able to do what we've been talking about, where you plug in your procedures, plug in your UCRs, compare your reimbursements, and make sure that you're not lower on any of your UCRs than you are on your reimbursements. This is a free spreadsheet tool that will do all the calculations for you to tell you, are my UCR office fees priced too low? How do my reimbursements compare to my other PPOs? What's my highest reimbursing PPO? It's an easy to use online spreadsheet, automated formulas. I've literally built this from scratch, so I know that it works. It's yours, easily a $500 value. You get it for free. Okay, so that's my gift to you for spending all this time listening to me today. And if you schedule a call with us, you go to ppoguide.com/go and you book that call and complete the consultation. We'll send you these free tools. Okay, now I will skip over all this recap because I want to jump to the Q&A, but here's your last reminder to go to ppoguide.com/go and you can get all those free materials. Now, Corinne, if you're still there and I haven't bored you to death, I want to go into the Q&A session, and I know we've got a ton of chats coming in, and I want to kind of knock those out if we can.
Sure. Yeah. Let's get to it. There's a lot, so we'll do our best to answer them all. Just kind of want to preface this. If we don't get to your question, you can always email us. You can email Philip, or you can just schedule a consultation right here. Awesome. Get your question answered. Great. All right. So let's jump right in. Let's see, where can we get the UCRs of other dentists in my area? And what should the rate of increase be each year?
That's a great question. So you can't get the literal UCRs of your peers unless they give them to you, which nobody probably will. But what you can do is kind of like what I mentioned earlier, which is use any type of an available percentile-based analysis tool, which you can usually buy. There's a couple of different ones out there. Henry Schein has one. We do one for our clients. We literally use Henry Schein's, so you don't have to pay for it. It's included in your service if you work with us. What those do is they usually source a lot of claim information across the country to create averages by zip code and percentiles. So that way you can know, according to a percentile, what's the 50th percentile, what's the 80th. So what's the average, what's the most common, what's the least common UCR for my zip code. That's going to be the most accurate way to gather that information. So again, you can get one of those through us. You can go direct to Henry Schein and get an analysis. They're not very expensive, but what they will provide you is kind of the most accurate information around what are my peers charging in my geographic zip code. Now, how often should I raise those and what should the rate be? It's going to come down to where are you now? So how often you should evaluate them. We recommend practices evaluate their UCRs annually. So you should get a report like that done, because if this economy is any indication, there's a lot of inflation that has occurred in the last 12 months. So things change. So it's even more of a reason to look at your production summary and your UCRs every year. And then also in terms of the percentage increase, I don't think that there's a magic number. It's more of where do you compare against your peers in terms of a percentile. So if you're anywhere north of the 70th or 80th percentile, that means that you're competitive for your area. So again, so long as you're not feeling a super huge squeeze on your reimbursements, that means you're competitive. I think that every practice should evaluate those and kind of account for inflation each year. So if to you that means 3 to 5% annually, then that's fine. But at the minimum, it always starts with where do you fit? If you're already in the 40th percentile, you probably have quite a bit of room to where you need to improve to. But you also can't do such a huge jump that you shell shock your patients either. So that's something that will help you evaluate. Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you. Another question says, do you negotiate with HMOs as well?
That's a pretty common question. So the reason why we don't, it's not because we don't want to, but it's because of how HMOs work. So like what most practices know is that most PPO, most insurance companies have really either 1, 2, or 3 specific type of plan levels. They've got PPO, which is preferred provider according to fee schedule reimbursements. And then there's HMO, right? In that HMO delineation, the way that an HMO works is there's a capitation. So it's basically kind of like subscription dentistry, I guess you could describe it that way, where you receive a specific capitation every month. But there's not really a necessary limitation on how much dentistry the patient can get. And so because there's that capitation model where you're receiving basically a flat reimbursement or a flat rate per patient that you treat, it's not really smart for the insurance company to fluctuate or negotiate those reimbursement rate amounts, because that's completely different from what the model is that they're trying to do, which is you're going to get paid either X percent or X rate per patient you treat, right? And they're going to come in here. So that model, because it depends on the usage and that capitation, no insurance company is going to be willing to fluctuate that up. That's all down to a pretty complicated algorithm for them. We don't normally recommend that practices accept HMOs because a lot of times you can get abused. We don't definitely encourage them to take that type of a plan level. But again, it's up to you. But again, long story short, we don't negotiate those because they're not negotiable.
Okay. Thank you, Philip. Next question reads, can you negotiate on behalf of the dentist, or do they have to be on the phone as well with the companies?
Absolutely. It's a good question. So it really just depends on the insurance company. 3 years ago, we did 99% of all the negotiations. As of late, we've noticed that there's some specific carriers that respond more positively to you doing the negotiation yourself. Now, if that's the case, we've made that decision strategically, not because we're trying not to negotiate. Believe me, we would prefer to have the conversation. But in a situation where they've responded more positively to the practice reaching out, we do everything we can to empower you to make that as effective as possible. So what that means is in a situation like with Cigna, right now, this is an occurrence with them. If you reach out to Cigna, then we'll tell you, here's who you can reach out to. Here's what you can say. We can give you a word track or an email canned response if you want it. Send it to them. And then if they decide to negotiate with you and they respond back, then we'll evaluate that offer, tell you if it's competitive and whether or not we think you should continue to approach for more. So we'll try to make that negotiation process as easy for you as possible. If you're the one that has to approach it, tell you who to talk to, what to say, and how to respond. only if that's necessary. Otherwise, we would prefer to have the conversation because, again, then we can bring the leverage and the expertise directly to them and take the time off of your plate. But again, if it's going to be a scenario where it makes the most sense, we'll walk you through that. And that fluctuates. It depends on the state, depends on the time of the year, depends on the state of that insurance company. We'll walk you through those in any scenario. It's part of the benefit of going through a consultation, as we'll evaluate that with you and tell you, okay, in your state, this is what we're doing with these insurance companies.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next question says, if an insurance company responds telling you that the fee schedule you are on is higher than anything they can offer now, do you have to accept that at face value?
I mean, I think that's a pretty common response from an insurance company to say, look, not only are we not going to negotiate, but you're on a pretty fantastic fee schedule. It's not to say that that's not true. It's not to say that that's not an attempt from them to just try to get you to stop asking. But again, it just comes down to you can continue to ask, but they can always continue to say no. One of the benefits of working with us is we may be able to ask and may get a different answer because we may be asking somebody else than who you're talking to now. Also, us asking may kind of clear the air because they know that we're aware of what's available in the market. So that's one of our advantages. And also, you're right, 100%. We could get the same response. We've gotten the same response before. And so sometimes we have to take that at face value and we can prove that, yeah, that is a pretty dang good fee schedule. So that makes sense. And in a situation where we say, look, we still believe that this is truly a poor fee schedule, we can still provide convincing information back to the insurance company. One of the most effective ways to do that, if a PPO says, hey, I think you're actually on a pretty competitive fee schedule for your area, one of the easiest ways to combat that response is to take the fee schedule that they have you on now and to plug in the fee schedules, your top 3 highest paying PPO fee schedules of other carriers. So for example, if this PPO says you're on a great fee schedule and you know that compared to your other carriers, it's actually not, it'd be really great if you could throw into a report Delta, MetLife, Cigna, if those 3 are really high and that is not, or whatever, it doesn't matter who the insurance company is, and then send that back to them and say, I realize that, but in comparison to our other PPOs, this is actually substantially lower. So I would like you to reconsider. That can be helpful. We do that a lot with our clients too, is to use your current rates from other carriers as leverage to say, I realize that you're saying that this is competitive for you, but across the market for PPOs, it's actually not. And I can prove it to you. Here's my fee schedule. So that's usually a helpful tip.
All right. Awesome. Do you have a minute just to get in 1 or 2 more questions?
Oh yeah,
Philip?
I've got plenty of
Okay.
time.
Okay, great.
If you're willing to stay on, Corinne, and everybody else is willing to stay on, I'm happy to. Yep.
Sure. Awesome. Thank you. So this next question is from Al, and he asks, if you work with Unitas, what is the typical timeline?
It's a good question. So it depends on the it depends on the service that you're going to elect for. Each service depends on the type of practice that you are, which is a lot of why we want to do a consultation. So we have kind of 3 main customer types and 3 main service products. One is for if you're an established practice that has a ton of insurances and you've been a network for more than 2 years, you fall within kind of our most popular category. If you're starting a new practice from scratch or you just started, you fall into another category. If you are a network, or sorry, if you've been in existence for a while, but you really don't take very many insurance companies, but you want to, that's our 3rd category. And those are kind of the most popular. This is the most popular and then goes down to the least popular. If you're the most popular, which most of you probably are, you've been in business for more than 2 years, you're with a ton of insurance companies, you're unhappy with those rates, that's going to fall into what's called our Ppo Management Service. That's roughly a 12-month minimum program. The reason why it's 12 months is because there's 4 phases that we work through. Each phase is chronological. So a lot of the details of those phases we go into on the consultation, and I can give you a lot more context on that call. That's typically a 20 to 30-minute conversation. But quickly, what I can say is in those situations, we have to first gather information from the insurance companies about how you participate. Then we got to negotiate. Then we got to optimize. And then we got to audit. If that sounds familiar, it's because it's what we just went through. So the framework that we just went through today is the same framework we go through with you if you were to work with us. The reason why we have it at a 12-month minimum program is because insurance companies take a long time to respond back to what we're asking, and they're chronological. So we have to gather this piece of information before we move on to the next step. So that's the answer. It's a 12-month minimum program. A lot of practices will look at that and say, all right, sweet. And other practices will say 12 months, that's forever. In reality, the best way to look at it is either you're going to do something or you're going to do nothing. This is the best way to approach it. We've been doing it for 10 years. We know that this is the right strategy for you. If you think that you can get it done in 3 weeks, then you're skipping a step. It's just like if somebody said that they could come in and do a full set of crowns on my teeth for $200, I'd be like, are you sure you're giving me crowns? Or are you giving me aluminum foil? Because that doesn't seem like that's the right price. So it's the same thing here with PPO negotiations. It takes a lot of time to negotiate and optimize. And it takes a lot of time if you're doing it properly, but it's because you're waiting on the insurance companies to give back the proper response. So without getting into tons of detail, that's a lot of the point in the consultation is to answer a lot of those questions in terms of what are we doing at each of those phases and what are we waiting on. And so if you want to know more, I definitely recommend you schedule that call so we can go through those in more detail and talk to you about why it is that time frame.
Perfect. All right. We do have a few questions on fee schedules. One person had said that they requested it from their insurance company. They tell them that the only option is to receive it by mail and it never comes. And then someone else asks, how do I get contracted fee schedule with my insurance companies? Some representatives I talk to say that they can't send it. Do they have to provide this information, or is this kind of common?
So they should be providing it to you. I mean, them saying that they have to send it to you by mail, that is pretty crazy. I've heard that for a couple of years. You may need to try calling back to provide relations to see if you can get somebody else. Or if whoever's saying that they're getting their fee schedules mailed to them, definitely should like hop on a call and talk to us and tell us what PPO that is, because that may not be the case. At a minimum, we can tell you who you should probably be emailing instead of the person that you're talking to right now. But it is sometimes difficult to get those fee schedules. It's not a matter of them not being willing to send them to us. It's just because it takes them forever to respond. If they're saying that they can't send you your own current fee schedule, I'm reluctant to believe that you're talking to the right person or that they understand what you're asking. So calling general provider relations, and if they confirm that you're in network, asking for a copy of your contracted reimbursement fee schedule should be pretty self-explanatory. They should be willing to provide it to you. Now, they may insist on faxing it to you, which is annoying, right? Because if it doesn't come through, that can be annoying, but they should be able to provide you a copy of that. And if they don't, then I would raise hell until they do, because it's pretty important for you to know what your reimbursement rates are supposed to be.
Okay. All right. Do you guys work with specialists like periodontists?
Absolutely. So
All right.
it's a pretty common question to ask about specialties. There's not much of a difference there for us. Where it's going to be different is some PPOs have different fee schedules if you're a specialist, but we're specialist agnostic. So we're willing to work with orthodontists and GPs in any type of specialty practice.
Perfect. All right. Can one DDS be in network while another DDS in the same practice remain out of network?
Absolutely. So there's some small cases where it depends on the owner. So some PPOs require that the owner be in network if he or she wants one of their associates to be in network. So there's a few small cases where they require everybody to be in network, particularly the owner. But it's not super common. For the vast majority of time, the answer is yes. One can be in and one can be out. All the more reason to, when you're gathering participation, to confirm it by doctor, because it is dangerous to assume that everybody's in network if somebody's not, or vice versa.
Okay. Next question is, do you assist dentists to move from PPO to fee for service?
That's a good question. The short answer is yes. The long answer is it depends. So if you're trying to go fee for service, it's obviously because you're probably pretty frustrated with your reimbursement rates. It also depends on how many patients you have on specific plans. If your overall goal is to drop insurances, we understand that. We talk to a lot of practices who come to us with that goal. But what our first intention is we want to be clear, is our first intention is to improve the reimbursement rates you're taking now. So a lot of practices want to drop an insurance company. What we typically recommend is, before we talk about termination, let's figure out what we can improve. Can we get a better fee schedule that allows you to remain in network? And the reason why is, it's not because we're trying to not get you to stay in network with insurance. It's because it's pretty difficult to survive right now in the marketplace being purely fee for service. A lot of our practices have tried it, and then they come scrambling back to try to go in network. And now they've lost all their leverage, because now they're desperate to join again. And the PPO is like, oh, welcome back. Okay, here's a bad fee schedule. So again, it's not that we're unwilling to help you with it. We just want to carry out the proper process. So we want to first confirm how you're participating, try to negotiate and optimize to the best of our ability. Then once we've done that, Then we say, okay, if you're still unhappy with some of these rates, let's be strategic, figure out which ones of these you can drop. If you want to, let's look at your patient base here, figure out if that makes enough sense for you. And let's be strategic and maybe cut out one and see how that goes, see how the patients react, see how your numbers change, and then you can move on down the list. So long story short, can we help you do it? Yes, but it's not like you'd come on, we'd start you in the next couple of weeks, and we'd just be firing out termination letters. That's not really our game. We want to make sure that you're approaching the in-network participation process correctly. And again, we want to make sure that you can stay in network if the rates are competitive.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Last question. I'm kind of lumping a few together because they were in the same category. But it's really about different PPO insurance companies and which ones are willing to negotiate. Like one person asks, our PPO is only Delta. What will be the other PPOs that are better in negotiating? And I have a few other questions that are similar to that. Is that something that you would discuss in the consultation?
Absolutely. And the reason why I would probably use the consultation, it's not because I don't want to answer them today, is a lot of times it depends on your state and it depends on your current participation type. So that kind of granularity, it's going to be best for it to be a one-on-one. That's the benefit of the consultation. Like I said, is it's less of a sales pitch and more of a literal consultation, which is why we call it a consultation and not like a demo, because it's more of us evaluating what is your current scenario, what's the plan, where's your state, what's been happening in that state, how do you believe you participate with them, and then we can kind of break down what the situation is. So like, for example, I've got notes right here of a call I took a couple hours ago where I wrote down the specific PPOs that she had. And then I looked up her state and I said, all right, here's the situation. Here's the situation for MetLife in your state. Here's the situation for Cigna and Delta and Guardian. So we can walk you through that, what your options are one-on-one.
Okay.
Cool.
Awesome. Philip, is there anything that I didn't get to that you saw that you want to wrap up before we close it out tonight?
No, that's it. I appreciate everybody for hanging on here. I appreciate your time. Again, don't forget to go schedule a call with us. If you go to ppoguide.com/go, you can get a free consultation, all those free tools. I might take your call or one of my colleagues will, but we'd be happy to have the chance to speak with you. But my last plug is just to say, if you've spent the time to watch the presentation today, you obviously know that there's an improvement that you can make. You want to make sure that you've improved your reimbursements. If you've taken all the time to listen to my boring voice for an hour, I hope you'll take the time to either, one, print out the guide and do something about it in your practice and try to improve it yourself if you can, or hop on a call with us and let us talk to you about how we can help you. The last thing I want anybody to do here is to watch the webinar and go home and do nothing. So please do something. Call us or print out the guide and work on it.
All right. Thank you, Philip, for the great presentation this evening and spending some time with us to answer those questions. If anyone has any outstanding questions, please email us at webinars@henryschein.com, or you can schedule the consultation right on your screen. To view and register for upcoming webinars, go to henryscheindental.com/webinars. And as a thank you for attending, everyone will receive the recording via email in the next week. Thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you on future webinars. Thanks again, Philip.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.